Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Kiwi Talkz. I am your host, Reese Riley, and my guest today is the Chief Executive of Momentum Waikato. I'd like to welcome Kelvyn Eglinton.
Morning. How are you, Reese?
Good. How you doing?
Good, mate. Yeah, good.
Yep. So first off, I just want to find out exactly what Momentum Waikato does, because I've tried to explain this to my friends and they kind of look at me blankly. So it's probably best that you explain exactly what it is.
Cool. Look, so Momentum Waikato is what's known as a community foundation, and it's based on a movement that has been around in the US and in Europe for years. And it's philanthropy, right? It's the act of giving and being generous with your wealth.
Yeah.
And when you travel around overseas, whether you're in Europe or particularly in the States, they have a culture of giving, and you'll notice that there'll be universities and hospitals and civic buildings named after families or businesses who have been around for years. So, and that's because they don't have or haven't had a structure such as New Zealand after the Holyoke years of a social welfare network and a government, ACC and all those other things that New Zealand enjoy. So the idea of philanthropy and giving has been a big part of what's developed communities over centuries in Europe and in the States more recently in modern times. So the concept here in New Zealand, and I think we can all sit back and look at service provision from local and central government and say, well, hang on, there's a growing gap between those who have and those who haven't, and the needs perhaps in health or mental health, particularly at the moment. And the idea of a community foundation is working with families and trusts and even people like you and I who want to give to build an endowment fund,
right, for
the Waikato region, so that the region has its own fund to support services and projects into the future. So that we've been going for about 4 years. We've currently got around $15 million in the endowment fund, which has been established. So that's been through gifts and bequest. And largely the bequest, or what we now call gifts and wills, has been a large part of growing these funds throughout the world. So people who have got an affinity or a real passion for an organisation or for a community have left in their wills parts of their estate those things. So, for example, you look at, I think it's the Harvard Endowment Fund, there's something like $45 billion in that fund left in large part by people who have been an alumni, ex-student of that university, who have then left parts of their estate to the university on their death. So that's one part of it. And we know, if you can develop that long-term strategy, and the closest example we've got here is the Acorn Foundation in Western Bay of Plenty. Now, they've been running for about 15 years. They're now at a point where they've got 30 million in their account, but they've got 300 bequests lined up for people to leave parts of their estate to go to the Western Bay of Plenty to be able to support services into the future.
Right.
So it's a real long game, right? And we do that through obviously talking to people about leaving bequests and to Momentum Waikato to enable projects. And some people are doing it already as a living gift, so that, like, I donate $50 a week to an education fund. Our staff do that. All of our board members have left bequests or do through payroll giving through their staff. And there's all sorts of ways you can build a fund over time. But that ability to take a longer-term game and establish an endowment fund for the region. So we also do it through trust transfers. So we know in New Zealand, and this is a little fact, so New Zealand's the second most generous country in the world. And
really?
Yep, absolutely. So
I did not know that.
That's right, which is really interesting. And a lot of that is not people with a lot of wealth giving big donations like the Bill Gateses of the world. Or,
yeah.
It's actually New Zealanders, people like you and me, giving small amounts on a regular basis. And actually, per head of capita, we're the second most generous nation in the world. America is actually the most generous nation in the world. But that's because of that bequest and philanthropy.
Yeah.
So you can build this concept over time, and that's what we're about. And so that therefore the proceeds of any endowment fund go back into the community, so that in the future the Waikato region will be able to, alongside our other big funding partners like government and local government and Trust Waikato and the Well Energy Networks, they'll actually be able to, we'll be able to support those services from our own fund on the ground rather than have the gap. So yeah, it's a bit of a complex concept, but when you think about it,
yeah. Well, because when I try to explain it to people,
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I put this into 2 sentences?
yeah, it's not a 2 sentence. It's not a 2 sentence answer, but really, if you think about it, it's building an endowment fund through the gift of giving, and then the fund is invested, and the proceeds from that fund go back to the community.
So do you reach out to people in particular, or do they just all come to you?
Oh, no, both really. So we've got some great examples of philanthropy in Hamilton already. So one is a very specific fund. So this is actually by a lady who wishes to remain anonymous, but she's established a fund. It's around $250,000. We've grown that fund now through our investments to around $300,000. And the proceeds from that fund go specifically to Polynesian women who are studying at Wellesley College. So each year, the proceeds of the fund, not the whole 300, but the amount that we grow it by each year, goes to Wellesley College, where scholarships for Polynesian girls to get a scholarship to attend that school. So that's really specific, right?
Yeah.
But then here in Hamilton, many people know about the Taitua Arboretum out here in New South. Fantastic.
It's great.
Gift to the city by John and Bunny Mortimer. Now, John unfortunately passed away last year, but the Mortimers have set up a gift program where the fund that they've associated with Momentum is growing each year through investment, and the proceeds from that fund go back to the Arboretum for it to do project development of whatever they wish it to do. So at that stage, there's that level. And then, of course, you've got the really philanthropic families that already exist here in Hamilton, or in the Waikato, like the Gallaghers and the Perrys. And so the idea is some people come to us and are saying, look, we're really into surf life saving, or we want to support this community, or we'd really like to support environmental concerns, or this group, and we want to leave a bequest. And then we've also had people sign up to us, and we're going out individually. We've got a database of around some 2,000 people that have shown an interest to us over time, and we're slowly working through meeting with them one-on-one with the team and talking to them about the concept. Now, it's a little bit like sales, but the reality is if people are really passionate about a cause and they want that cause to be supported forever, then they can establish a fund.
So how many funds are there?
Oh, look, we currently have about 12 funds over the last 4 years.
Okay.
But again, when you look at Acorn, they've been running for 19 years.
Yeah.
They've got some 300 funds potentially lined up to come in over the next 30 years.
Wow.
So, and the thing is that in Momentum, once you set that fund up, it leverages all the others. And we only pay one fee off one set of funds rather than paying individually. So in the old days, previously, families would set up their own trusts.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of been the New Zealand way of doing it. They set up their own trust to support their families. And absolutely, you still need to look after your family first. But if you left a percentage of your estate and establish a fund with a Momentum, there's no fees. You don't have to worry about the accountability and the management because we do all that for you.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is make a decision about where you put the proceeds. So it's quite a cool model for the community to be able to support something longevity. So a lot of people have given gifts in their wills before, like the RSPCA, for example. They actually get quite a lot of bequest things, but it's spent straight away. The money comes in and the organisation spends it on something.
Right.
But in this case, you can establish a fund and the proceeds go back to that cause forever because the fund keeps growing, it's invested, the proceeds keep growing, and then it goes to that organisation.
Where do you decide where you invest it, though?
Yeah, so good question, right? So, because trust is pretty important in this stuff because you're dealing with people's cash. So, we use 2 independent advisories. So we use Craig's Investment Partners, so professional firms, and Forsyth Barr currently. And our board is independently appointed. So the board is appointed by another group of independent people who are established by our deed. Mm-hmm. So they're not specific people, they're specific roles in the community. So, for example, the mayors get to nominate someone. The head of the Institute of Directors gets to nominate someone. The head of Well Energy and Trust Networks gets to nominate someone on that appointments panel. So that gives us a sense of independence. Then that group comes together to appoint who should be on our board, depending on what our strategy is at the time.
It sounds like a long process.
It is, but what it does is it means that no one on your board can capture the board or can make decisions around the funds for people, and it gives it that independence, right? Okay. So you have to have some complexity in there to get that independence in that process. Yeah. So because people need to trust that we're going to manage their funds right.
If all the councils amalgamated, though, would that make it easier or harder?
It would make it easier because you'd only have one mayor for a start. But no, it would make it easier. In many ways, it would make it easier.
But would there be more risk involved with one person? Controlling everything?
No, because it wouldn't be one person. Remember, the mayor would only get to nominate one person, and then you'd have someone from the IOD, and you got someone from Well Networks, and then those people have to identify 3 others through a nomination process themselves. So there's always a sense of independence coming in. Okay. So no one agency can take full control over anything that happens within the organisation. So it is quite complex.
Yeah.
But it has to be to get that independence and that trust. Yeah, but we so bequest is one part of it, and donations obviously, and payroll giving. We've just set that up with Longveld. Yep. So Longveld have established a Longveld fund where their staff pay into a portion of their salaries, like $10 a pay or $5 a pay.
Yeah.
And the great thing about payroll giving is that if you put in say $30 because of the tax rebates you get, you actually only pay $20 and you get a rebate directly that happens through the payroll system. So even though you've contributed $30, you get a tax rebate because it's a donation.
Did you know this before?
No,
becoming chief executive?
Not many people know this, right? So that's the beauty of giving. Anything over $10, you get a tax rate rebate on. So for corporates and businesses and individuals, it's quite a good deal. If you want to support something, you do it through a donation, and through payroll giving, if you do it straight away, you get that rebate directly happening into as a credit. So you don't have to go through a tax form and do all the rest of it. It just happens through the payroll system.
That's good. That would save a lot of time.
Yeah, man, that's right. So people like you and I, we're not super wealthy or anything, but we can, or maybe you are, I don't know.
Oh, no, I definitely am not.
We got a pretty cool studio here, mate. So, but it's that whole thing about, small amounts by many people to a certain cause makes the biggest difference. We know that, right? And sure, we see the Blinder Gates, or here we've got the Gallagher family making a great contribution, the Pearys and others. But those things are the catalyst for many people to make small donations to make things happen. So people say, well, that's very complex. So what? What are you doing with that? So every 3 years we give out $1 million to 1 or 2 groups. So we're not in the business of giving small amounts of money. We give big grants to 1 or 2 groups that are going to make a big difference. And so far we've supported Zeal Hamilton, and they've reduced youth crime. If you look at the youth crime statistics in the CBD, they've dropped off because Zeal have been operating in that space over the last 3 years. So that's been a pretty good success.
Yeah.
The Tenure River Care, which has been based out in Te Awamutu, they were a small marae-based nursery working with 3 people planting, say, 10,000 trees a year. Their plan was to plant the whole of the Tenure River system, which is their awa, there in their rohi. They now, through our investment, employed 20 people from the marae, planting over 500,000 trees. They've got contracts now worth $2 million to do tree planting and pest eradication and plants. And now they've got a social enterprise business happening out of Te Awamutu. So that's a pretty cool thing to get involved in.
So
and change.
How do you decide
which ones?
Yeah, which ones? Yeah.
So we run a request for proposal system. So it's quite a full-on system where we're really looking for business sustainability, good governance, management practices, and something that's going to create change either within a community, so like Te Awamutu or Hamilton CBD, or create change in an issue. So the one other project which we're really proud of, which is actually now picked up as government policy, is the support for lunches in schools. So at Tukurua, we support Kapaikai lunches. And the idea behind providing lunches at schools is, yes, it keeps kids who don't have food at home, but what it does, it actually lifts their educational attainment because those kids aren't hungry in the afternoons, and we can see the study shows that behaviour is better, educational attainment is better because they're not hungry.
Yeah.
But rather than just providing the lunches, we're also doing things like actually working with families around budgeting and advice and food security and education. So we're trying to get to the root cause. So not just do the, if you just feed the lunches, you're not really putting out the fire, right? You're only
Yeah, well, that's right. You want to give them the means to be able to do things themselves.
Absolutely. So the lunches deals with a specific issue, but then behind that you need to deal with the root cause. And that's what Momentum is actually all about, that transformational project sort of idea, the concept that if you have an endowment fund and you can, rather than just support the ongoing filling of the gaps, but actually stop the gaps happening in the first place, then that's what we should be trying to do. So that, in theory and in practice, actually, that's what we're trying to do. Big endowment fund, 300 million in the next 30 years. We're currently at 15 million. We've just agreed some signing of a trust that'll get us to about 28 million. And we've also signed some agreements with the Houchins in terms of some assets and land, which will enable us to do different activities and services. So we're about 30 million. So once that grows over time and as bequests come through and those funds start coming through from people, and there are other trusts talking to us now who want to transfer to us. And I'll explain that in a minute. But once we get to that point of, say, 30 years' time, we've got $300 million, then the Waikato should be in a position to actually stop those gaps occurring in the first place. It's really, it's really tough out there, right? Like there was a work done by a specialist panel on social welfare gap, and they identified that there's $630 million worth of gap in social service funding provision each year in New Zealand.
Really?
Yeah, $630 million.
I'd imagine that would increase every year, wouldn't it?
I'd imagine so, right? Because we all know that it's getting tougher out there for people at the lower end of the spectrum. And those between those who have and have not, it's getting tougher, and the squeezing up the middle classes. So how do you address that? Our view is you can't just keep funding the gap. You've actually got to try and bridge the gap and stop it from happening. Yeah, well,
that's the problem. That's the problem. You've got to, rather than just giving people stuff, you've got to give them the means to be able to get out of that situation.
Absolutely. And we, that's where we think if you can get a fund together with the right process, we know there are people out there with clever ideas and services that are, if they could be, Tenure River Care's a classic, right? 3 people doing 10,000 trees. Now they've got environmental outcomes, better water quality, young people involved on their marae, 20 people who are unemployed now working, that's a real game changer for that small community in that marae. Imagine if you could replicate that now across the whole Waikato River.
Yeah. But how do you change them? Because obviously there'd be some people out there that have no interest in actually getting out of their situation. Like they've gone to a point where they've mentally conditioned themselves to just kind of, I'm in this situation, and they don't actually have any desire to get out of it.
Yeah, look, and I think everyone jumps to that end, but you're talking about the really tough end of the spectrum there, right? Like the people who are at that end. But that's actually the small percentage. And what that social welfare, the group, the specialist group on social welfare performance said is that actually that's a small percentage, even though that's the picture that communities paint of the whole, it's actually very small.
Right.
Everyone else between, as you move up the spectrum, who are getting support from the community or from the government, actually want to move out, and actually it's how do you move them out of that area where they can do their own thing? Yeah, and so the public perception of that, they're really tough, they don't want to move. Yes, those are there exist,
are some, but there are others that aren't.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's the old 80-20 rule. If you can move 20% of those people who are 80% of the demand, then that's better for the country overall, right?
That's right.
So it's let's get to those people who, it's like nowadays the term is earning but can't own, like the terrible term working poor. People who are earning money but actually can't
living pay week to pay week.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we shouldn't be in that situation in New Zealand. We should have some other system that enables us to break out of that. So whether that's different types of home ownership models. So, we keep talking about the New Zealand dream of owning a home.
I think that's kind of died, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it should be about having a tenure of a house.
Yeah.
So rather, if you don't own a home, you're exposed to the vagrancies of the rental market, right?
That's right.
So you don't have security. But we had something that was in between that in terms of long-term lease arrangements, community lands trust, or affordable homes, which are rent-to-own systems, right, which are now coming through after the failure of Kiwi Build and other programs,
Yeah.
what that does is gives families tenure, security of tenure of a home.
Mm.
So rather than being open to the vagrancies of the rental market, they know they've got a payment, they've got 10-year long-term lease, they know what that payment system is, they can build a future around that, right? So we know that the rental market means you get transitionary families, they move around, they have to move schools, they lose their job, all of that stuff happens.
Well, part of the problem is housing just keeps getting more and more expensive, and obviously the landlords put the price back on the renters.
Absolutely.
So then the rental, the price of rent actually goes up as well.
Absolutely.
So it seems a very, very difficult thing to try and manage.
And this is the case. I mean, so when I was at Hamilton City Council as the regional growth manager, general manager for city growth, the advice we gave to council was you actually need to bring in a specific intervention to provide affordable housing. So more supply of land doesn't do it, because councils can't afford to open up more land with infrastructure. Because
it's very expensive.
It's expensive, right? You've got pipes and roads and all those things.
Yeah.
And councils are limited to how much they can spend by their revenues. So you need every part of the system to pull the levers they've got at their hand. So explain that, right? So banks, right at the start, they need new systems for higher risk on people or different lease arrangements for financing options. Councils need to say, well, if we're going to do affordable housing, we need to not charge development contributions on those properties. We need to work with developers who are prepared to take a lower than market return. So most developers want to get 12 to 20% on their returns, but actually groups like Momentum will do it for 3 or 4%, right?
Right.
You need to have councils say, well, we might give that affordable housing area rates free for the next 4 years to allow people to build and put that into their house to build up an asset base. You need material providers to say, look, we're going to do the affordable housing rates at a lower level of return. So rather than taking their margin, they'll take a lower margin. You need builders who are going to do it. You need everyone to pull a lever to get affordable housing.
But then I think some people say affordable housing is between the 500 to 600 range, and I'm not even sure if that's what you call affordable housing.
Well, that's in the current market. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not, right? I mean, let's be honest, it's not. So that's what I mean. That's because no one's pulling any one lever. You need all of those different groups, so banks, finances, governments, local government, builders, material providers, to pull all the levers they can to make it affordable.
And then if one party does not want to do it,
that's right,
then it all falls through.
Yeah, because their whole argument is, if you provide more land, then developers will build more houses and that'll bring the price down, because it's this whole supply and demand argument. The problem is, in housing in New Zealand, because we don't have capital gains tax, and because like all of us, we invest in another house as our retirement savings and blah, 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 it's an accretive asset, so it gains value. So the demand and supply thing only works when you don't gain value, right? So economics 101, but it's like when bananas go up in price when they've had a storm in Queensland and there's no more bananas, right? Because of scarcity. But actually with housing, with scarcity, it drives prices up.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you supply more housing, the market will still pick it up, because there's still a rental market, right?
Yeah.
There's still there's still a demand. So to get ahead of the curve, ahead of the wave of demand, you've got to build so many. And of course, we haven't got enough builders, and we haven't got enough material supply. And
well, this is what I find interesting, because a lot of people seem to have. I see people on Facebook all the time commenting on how to fix the housing problem, and it's like I don't think most people know actually the complexity of it.
No, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, so it's difficult.
It is difficult, and actually the model is there is no one model, right? So the council, Hamilton City Council, have actually put forward a concept of a community lands trust, which is really cool. It's a good idea.
And it probably Andrew mentioned that to me. Yeah.
Yep. And I think that the concept's right. It just needs probably a bit more grunt, right? Like at the moment they've put $2 million towards it, but it probably needs about $10 million. And the reason for that is that needs to go out and work with and to buy land and hold that land, and then the idea is that you subdivide that land to provide so many houses, and then you and I could come along and we pay to build our house on the land.
Their land.
And then the idea is that rather than, so the only capital you have to outlay is the cost of the house, not the cost of
Not
the land, right?
Oh, okay.
Because it's the land, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you pay a lease to the landholder.
How much would that be, though? Would it depend on the size of the land,
Depends on the size of the land. It depends on what they've bought it for. Now, ideally, what you get is a situation where land is donated. So if the land is free, then any lease arrangement can be done cheaper, and then you're only building a house. So if you can build a small footprint house, say 2 rooms, 2-bedroom home for, say, 350,000, which is doable, that's affordable.
Yeah.
But you have to pay an annual lease. So you pay rates plus an annual lease. So it means that your annual outgoings are slightly higher, but you've got tenure over that place. And then when you want to move on and you want to sell, you sell back to the lands trust who buy the capital off you.
Right. But I'd imagine, because I've been overseas quite a bit, and I find that every other country I've been to tends to build up as opposed to out.
Absolutely.
But for some reason, we like to build out here.
Yeah, I think that's changing the way. I agree with you. That has been the model. I mean, Auckland's
a
classic, right?
Classic example.
Yeah. And Tauranga is the same. And and the problem with both those places is that, unlike Hamilton, the constraints that Auckland and Tauranga have got with the harbours and the
they're
peninsulas.
geographically challenged. Well, Auckland in particular, because it sits on an isthmus. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So, Hamilton absolutely is actually I think it's the second or third smallest local authority by footprint.
Yeah.
I think there's Kawerau and one other group, one other council. But you're right. I mean, how do we protect productive land? And as more and more people have lived overseas, like you and I, and many of us have, and we've lived in apartments and we've lived in, that idea is not so unappealing. And in fact, if the more apartment living you can get, and that's where it's more affordable, that's the opportunity.
But you got to try and sell that to people, because I think there's this cultural conditioning in New Zealand where Kiwis just think, well, I need this big plot of land, I need a house.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I lived in Jakarta for a while, and when I was in the mining game, and lived on the 26th floor, and with the family, and we've gone back to a lifestyle block just out at Matangi.
Yeah.
But that's because that's what we, after living in that space. But I'm not sure that that's such a hard sell anymore. I think that what you're starting to see, and the Deneen brothers have just developed the apartments on Tristram Street opposite the Founders.
Yeah.
And there's another one going up. So, and there's already some inner city living occurring. That's happening more and more.
Well, I know. The current council is trying to cut red tape to allow. To stop height restrictions in terms of how high you can build. But I understand that with Hamilton in particular, because of the fertile land, it's quite hard to build a strong foundation the taller you get. I think it gets more expensive up to 6 levels. Yeah,
look, it does. That's part of it, but that's not all of the area, right? Let's not get sucked into what the politicians will tell you.
Well, this is why I've got you on.
Yeah. So consent. So let's talk about consent, right? So height restrictions,
right?
What all that means is, when they say you now need to get a resource consent, means that you can build up to 6 levels without consent. You're allowed to do it. If you want to go above 6 levels to say 7, 8, or 9, all that happens is it's not means you can't do it. What it means is you have to look at some mitigate. You have to see whether going 3 floors more has an impact on your neighbours and on the environment. So things like lighting, shading and noise come in. So if you get an assessment done that says there's no impact on your neighbours, or actually our neighbours have signed off and said that's fine, or there is no impact on lighting, shading and noise and other aspects.
But usually there is when you build.
Yeah, but you can mitigate that, right?
Yeah.
And there is always some impact even when the neighbour next door to you builds a new garage, there's some impact.
Yeah.
It's just how big is that impact?
Right.
And if that impact is determined to be less than minor, then you can do it. All it means is that the consent is like a line. You get to that line, and now you've got to have a higher level of evidence to do the next bit you want to do.
Right.
So in terms of regulation, it's not you can't do it. There's more cost involved, and I think that's where Andrew...
So does most of the cost come from the neighbours and the consent process, as opposed to the actual cost of building the thing.
No, well, not necessarily from the neighbours. It comes from you now having to have a higher level of evidence to show the impact. So you've now got to do more work. So you've got to get a acoustic assessment done, and you've got to get a light shading assessment done, and you've got to have a consultation with your neighbours, and so all those other things you have to do to prove that there's no impact just adds to the cost and the time. So when you're developing any commercial thing, cost and time is obviously a big part of that. So that's the sort of stuff I think where Andrew King, in terms of his idea of the red tape review, is absolutely right. Can you make that, not saying we shouldn't have it, but can you make it more efficient? Can you make it clearer? Can you make it easier? Can you, and those things are absolutely right. And, I put a post up yesterday on LinkedIn and Facebook that talked about actually local government's really misunderstood. You pay about the same for electricity as you do for your rates, but look at what you get for your rates as opposed to just an electricity bill.
Yeah.
But we knock it, right? Oh, it's inefficient and it's terrible and it's really useless and they don't care. That hasn't been my experience. Could it be more efficient? Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But let's not kid ourselves that every commercial organisation in the world is the most efficient one. I used to work for the second biggest gold miner, and I can tell you that was just as inefficient and bureaucratic around decision making as a council.
In terms of what though?
Well, just time frames and the amount of where you spend your capital and when you spend your time and what approvals you have to get from your different management and executive to get a project done.
So would you question everything when you were there?
At council?
Oh no, when you were doing at the mining corporation that you're at.
Yeah. I mean,
were you like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, well, everyone did, right?
Yeah.
That was.
And did they actually have an answer, or were they just like, well, this is just what we've done?
Well, no, that's right. I mean, I think there was what was really interesting is that the first answer was, this is just how we do it, right? Because we've got to have stage gate process. So and look that
traditions.
And it's a corporate culture. The difference with commercial and corporate organisations is that if they want to change, they can change fast.
Right.
And they can take a higher level of risk. And I actually think that's the beauty of New Zealand small businesses, is that they don't have big processes, right? It's one or two people who are the bosses or a group of people as an executive who decide, we're going to do this, we're happy with the level of risk in our due diligence and we're just going to go with it.
Yeah.
That's the efficiency piece, right? Whereas local government doesn't have that because you're dealing with public funds and you're exposed to a lot more criticism, you're exposed to a lot more critique, and rightly so. It is public funds, so you do have to have a level of due diligence and to ensure that what you are doing is appropriate and that the spend is right and that when you have finished it, because what you don't want is another Bella Vista, right? Like in Tauranga, you don't want that.
No.
So, but sometimes that means that you become a bit risk averse and you don't take the risks that you might do as a commercial operator.
Right.
Because councils can't walk away.
No.
Right? So if something goes wrong in a development, the developers already developed the houses, they've moved on. They've sold the houses, right?
Yeah, onto the next one.
They move on to the next one.
Yeah.
The liability sits with the council, with the ratepayer. So everyone forgets that.
Yeah.
Developer's done the property, cool, we've signed it off, and then suddenly something happens we didn't know about or that we thought was there and we thought, no, it'll be fine. That's why it's inefficient. It's because it has to take those steps. Now, does it need to take as long? Does it need to be as, bureaucratic around it? No, it could be faster, better, quicker. But there is that level of exposure and liability that sits with a local body that it wouldn't do elsewhere. Man, we're covering heaps of stuff, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Still got a while to go too.
Yeah, but this is why housing is, to bring it right back to housing, this is why housing is expensive. Yeah. Every time you have another Christchurch earthquake or another fire in a house where people, where injury to people and deaths occur, leaky buildings, all of those issues mean that there's another set of regulations put into the Building Act or into the compliance codes which ratchets up the responsibility of local governments to ensure that things are safer, more waterproof, which is the right thing to do. But what people forget is that, swimming pools, so, rightly so, now you've got to have fencing. So now you've got to have fencing, you've got to have inspections. And then every time something happens like that, and all of those rules are actually established in central government. So dog control is a central government law thing carried out by local government.
Right.
The Building Act is a central government building act regulated at local government level.
Yeah, I think I remember Angela saying to me that every time they changed the policy in terms of earthquake-proof buildings.
Yeah.
It changes the whole process, not for just, say, Wellington, where an earthquake occurred, but for the whole
country.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every time, leaky buildings, someone drowns in a swimming pool, fire, and even internationally now, so anything big happens internationally, they'll look at it here and how does that affect. So when people say New Zealand's really heavily regulated, it is. But I would say that it's less about the regulation and about the scale of the agencies we have on a country of 5 million people, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's why housing becomes really expensive, because you've got to have a higher standard of materials and regulation and all of that. And all of this, that's only one factor, right? You've still got financing to talk about, and you've still got building, and you've still got compliance costs and blah, blah, blah.
So, because you were city growth manager at the city council, is that how you learned all this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't, and it was a really interesting thing, because I went in there coming from a corporate and I'd always worked alongside local government. I was in my mining career and before that in sport, and worked along central governments and local governments with land access deals and all those sorts of things.
Did you find it easier though, and say, because you worked in Indonesia and Asia?
Oh yeah, that was tough, man.
Yeah. Compared to, what's the difference between, say, red tape and consents and the whole process there versus here?
So Indonesia. So just a little segue. So Indonesia has for years had been a dictatorship, right? So under Suharto, and was a very centralised system, and it was pretty much do what you like. And of course, there's not the same overview of human rights and health and safety and environmental concern and that. And it was a developing nation that's now rapidly coming into being a developed nation.
Yeah.
Because of the growth of the middle classes within Asia. So you're seeing that in China and India. They used to call it the BRIC countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, Argentina.
Yeah.
So nations who have really rapidly increased. But, there's not the infrastructure in the ground. There's not, when it rains in Jakarta, the place stops because the stormwater just floods the city out into the harbour.
Yeah.
People have built shanties on the side. So it doesn't work. And, it takes you, I tell the old story that when first I went to Jakarta, it took me 4.5 hours to fly there. And I'd done, from Perth, but it took me the same amount of time to drive 28 Ks to get to my airport, from the airport to the apartment.
What was that for? Just because of traffic?
Yeah, traffic and monsoon rain, and that was it. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. And that's what it's like when it stops, right? When it rains, the city stops. But in terms of regulation, it's nowhere near. But what's happened now, in the last decade, is that it's a democracy, and now you've got this really decentralized system where you've got, central government, you've got state governments, you've got local councils, you've got small village mayors, and all these different levels of regulation and taxing, but there's no support or resourcing for it. So it's just a nightmare. Like, we had a team of something like 30 people who would just oversee the number of permits and different regulations we required on this massive Excel database every day to see whether we needed to provide a report or put an update or provide some inputs to it. So you don't want to get to that end.
Did it get easier though as the years went by while you were there?
Oh, no.
No? It got harder?
It got harder.
Really? How come?
Well, so Indonesia, like many of those countries who had been colonised, have now gone through this renaissance in terms of national pride, right?
Yeah.
So Newmont was an American company, and they're saying, well, hang on, you're taking our resources, nationalism, those resources would be better off if it was run by an Indonesian company, and we can do our own smelting of the copper, and we can melt down our own gold, and we can run it ourselves, and why are we giving it to an American company who takes it offshore and does other things with it, right? Even though the ability to capitalise something like a mine that size, which was, it's massive, wasn't within the ability of the Indonesian government. So they couldn't capitalise it, so you need the American money to come in and capitalise it. But rightfully, they're saying, well, hang on, could we now buy the mine and buy you out and have an Indonesian person run it and all the rest of it?
Yeah.
So that nationalism made things harder and harder. So for example, they instituted 6 monthly export permits. So every 6 months you had to apply for a permit to export the copper and gold to the world markets. This is a $2.1 billion mining operation with 7,000 people.
Yeah.
And every 6 months, you've got to say, well, if we don't get an export permit, we can't export the product and we can't sell it. So we've got to shut the mine down.
That's crazy.
Every 6 months, right?
Yeah.
And it takes about 3 months to prepare the materials they want for the. So, yeah.
So
it
that
was
must have been so frustrating.
Yeah, it was tough, right? It was a tough gig. It's so you talk about regulation in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And but regulation in New Zealand is less about the regulation. It's actually quite sensible regulation. Is there a lot of it? Yes. But, I would argue in a country of 5 million people, still got 17 DHBs and still got,
Yeah, well, I think it's easy to just get caught up in looking at the negatives, but you're not looking at everything from a global scale.
Yeah, that's right. So, and I'm not suggesting, I'm not actually a big fan of amalgamation of different aspects. I think, local communities and particularly in regional New Zealand is our greatest opportunity. I think, regional New Zealand, after being away for 10 years, was really struggling. Coming back, places like Te Awamutu, Cambridge,
they're doing pretty well.
They're doing well, man. They're bustling, and they weren't. Te Kuiti is slowly coming back. Places like that, and people are wanting to live in those places now, and they're beautiful places, they're clean places, and they're really productive places. And
do you think public transport though can enhance a lot of those little regional towns?
Oh, look, absolutely, and I think that my view of the Waikato, and particularly of Hamilton, is when we get our head around that it's not Hamilton, it's Hamilton, Ngaruawahia, Huntly, Morrinsville, Te Awamutu, Cambridge, that circle of people who can drive in and out of Hamilton within a 40-minute drive time.
Yeah.
When that is the view of what our community is, because that's how far we drive for work, school, education, entertainment, shopping. 40 minutes is, you do that to get out of the motorway.
Well, when I lived in Auckland, it'd take an hour and a half just to get to work.
Yeah.
And that's in West Auckland, driving to the CBD. So it's just like stupid.
So exactly. So in terms of your question around public transport, you imagine if we had great public transport links to all of those places on a regular basis that allowed people to come in and out of Hamilton all the time.
Yeah, well, the good thing about the upper North Island, at least, is everything's in close proximity.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, say, like Sydney or Melbourne or parts of Australia where everything seems to be isolated.
Perth, man.
Yeah, Perth is in the middle. There's nothing close to it. Yeah,
but it's a beautiful place to live. Yeah. But so that's when we get our head around that. That's our opportunity, and then absolutely, then with a 90-minute drive time of Hamilton, you're in Auckland, Taupo, Rotorua, Coromandel, Waihi Beach, Raglan.
Yeah,
that's when you get your head around that. And you go, oh, actually, that's it. I remember when I first moved here, I was like, man, the greatest thing about living in Hamilton is we're close to everything.
Yeah, that's its greatest asset.
Yeah, but everyone was, you can't say that. I was like, no, but that's actually what's good.
Yeah.
And from a housing perspective, in terms of a housing affordability, if we took that view, actually, and we had good public transport, well, maybe affordable housing is in Morrinsville and is in Te Awamutu, and you offset the travel costs through good public transport.
Well, that's why I'm hoping this train that launches next year does well.
Yeah. Because
it could be the start of something.
Yeah. And there was a really good question asked at one of the mayoral debates around what would you do if you had $1 billion gifted to the city? And what would you do with it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the answer, I can't remember, but light rail between all of those places, I mean, it would gobble up $1 billion pretty quick, but light rail or underground, probably light rail would be a winner. Because suddenly your housing stock's not just stuck in Hamilton where you've got to rely on a bus or
well, that's part of the problem Auckland has, right? Is you've got, if you want to work in Auckland, you have to live in Auckland.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the problem. Auckland really needs to become like London. And so,
and have really good transport links.
Yeah, because then people could work in Auckland and live in Hamilton and vice versa.
Yep, absolutely. I mean,
you just give people more options.
Yeah, and yes, there might be a if the downtime is the downside is the commuter time.
Yeah, well,
then
that's something that can be improved on over
That's
time.
right. If you get good public transport, that commuter time is actually better than if you've got to drive your own car at a cost, right? Like it's all those other things. So I think most people understand that concept, but it's got to be, and I think what we're starting to see with the Auckland to Hamilton corridor work that's been led by government and the metro work and about the connection, the mayoral plan, that thinking is starting to permeate what's happening here in the Waikato. But that is absolutely, so everything we've kind of talked about, affordability, that becomes more affordable because you've got more options for affordability and work. You've got the ability to go up, build higher in the CBD and within other parts of the city. And it doesn't just have to be the CBD, right? Like in the future, Rhododendron will be its own, or Taihape will be its own, just like North Harbour is its own part of Auckland, or Manurewa is its own part of Auckland, or Waitakere is its own part of Auckland. You'll have pockets of high density living. And when we're talking high density in New Zealand, we're not talking
20 stories.
We're talking 6 or 7. Right?
Yeah.
And we're and maybe even smaller. We're talking 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But it's that opportunity to have maybe half a dozen of those 3 or 4 story buildings. And if you look at Mount Maunganui, and I don't think Mount Maunganui has been done well, but that concept means that you've now got a pretty thriving community that's busy all the time. But that's that again might not have been done well, but it proves a point.
Yeah. That's interesting though. So do you talk to the council on a regular basis? Like, does Momentum Waikato work with the council? In terms of
all of the councils,
like partnerships and stuff. Yeah. And do you make suggestions to them as well? Like you talk to the mayor and be like, hey, you guys should probably do this. Mind you, the mayor probably gets that all the time from other people. But
I think they all do. Hey? The politician's job's a tough one. Like, I had a lot of run-ins with a lot of councillors about different aspects, but there was more collective working together with staff to get the right outcomes. And I take my hat off to anyone who stands for local government, man.
So you wouldn't want to do it?
No, I don't think so. Certainly not in the next 2 years. I'm only 47, give me a chance. But I take my hat off to them, right? It's a tough gig. It's a big, everyone has a crack. It's a national pastime to have a kick at a councillor, right?
Yeah.
And they are making massive decisions on huge amounts of technical information. That when you see those agendas that they get, and so there's got to be more efficiency around how we do that to support them make better decisions.
But do some of those councillors come to you personally and be like, "Can I get your thoughts on this policy?" Or anything?
Yeah, some do. Some do.
Yeah.
Some are active in that space. And I wouldn't.
You don't need to give me any names.
No. And some do. And I think. More and more so, the beauty of the Momentum model is we're apolitical, so we're not a lot. Council
not aligned with anyone.
No, they don't fund us. We are funded, as I said, through bequests and donations, and Well Energy Trust initiated us with a $10 million loan, so that enabled us to get up and get running, right? So we can go in. And the beauty of the model, and we'll probably get onto the theatre later on. But the beauty of that model means we can progress deals and get things happening free of the politics of the individuals or of the public even. We can make things happen because we can work with individual philanthropists or access cash and money or opportunity that councils can't. So we're always in communication with different councillors, just as we are with central government on different policy and other partners, like working with the Wises group around opportunities for wellbeing villages, or working with Waikato Tainui on opportunity for social enterprise around land reuse and formation. So we talk to a lot of people, and I think that's one of our we talk about connect and convene. That's one of our skill sets, right? We're able to connect people who may not know each other and bring a partnership together and really create a change. So, and we do that all the time. But I'm no expert. It's just kind of.
Hey, well, you know a lot more than I do. So to me, you are an expert.
I think one of the things that in my career, whether it was in the sport world when I first started out of university at Lincoln, or whether it was in mining. And in mining, even though I was chief of staff in Jakarta, I was actually, before that, I was head of external affairs. So I was working across local governments, state governments, indigenous groups, tangata whenua, community agencies, commercial parts of the business to try and get responsible activity in mining. And I'm a real big supporter of responsible business practice and corporate social responsibility. I think the corporate sector in New Zealand has a huge role to play in that.
Yeah,
both in terms of innovation and technology, but also just in how their business practices, how you deal with community and how you actually talk to people and engage with them. And, local government's got some way to move in that space as well. But, that ability, I don't think it's a technical skill. There's a lot of people who have a huge amount of technical knowledge in all of these spaces, but I have always been able to pick the parts across and put it into one narrative, and I always talk about narrative. I think when you get the right narrative in place and you can identify the right levers, you don't need to know you can just say, look, if you could do this part and work out how to do that, and you could do this part and you could do that, and someone else can do this, and you can be the orchestra to pull all that stuff together, that's where you get the change.
Right.
And I think that's what we need in leadership. Great leaders don't need to know everything. They need to understand how it all comes together and then work with the right people.
Oh, that's why you have a team, right? They can't know everything.
Yeah, fully.
Yeah. So how did the Waikato Regional Theatre come about?
Yeah, good question. So I was actually at council when the Founders Theatre was closed in 2016. So it was the fly system was deemed to be unsafe, and then there was some other structural review work done to replace the fly system. You then have to actually structurally review and strengthen other parts of the building. And the estimates back then, and it may not be the same now, but the estimates back then was they thought would be about $30 million to upgrade the fly system, get the structural connectivity done, and get the building back to being a safe building. And again, as a result of earthquake regulations and all those other things. So
Can Hamilton even have an earthquake though? I don't believe there's any fault lines near here.
I think there is some fault lines. I mean,
well, maybe not the extent of like Wellington. But.
No. Although in saying that, they thought that about Christchurch, right? They thought Christchurch was pretty safe, and then
and a fault line just popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, it had been there, but they weren't aware of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess I remember when the Christchurch earthquake happened in the Wellington one. I felt it at home. Our swimming pool was all over the place.
I did feel one. Yeah, I was in my room and the light moving, and I'm like, "Am I dizzy?"
It's pretty freaky. Yeah. I lived in Palmerston North. Well, I grew up in Palmerston North, and so we used to get heaps of earthquakes. So I knew exactly what it was.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because Palmerston North's on the fault line.
Yeah.
So we was going to. So anyway,
theatre. Yeah.
I feel like Billy Connolly coming back around on. So the theatre was closed. Founders was closed. And the council rightly went to the community and said, look, if we're going to spend $30 million, what would you want us to do? Do you want us to renovate Founders or build new? Initially, people come back and said, renovate Founders. And then they said, well, what about if we capped our... and people come back and said, but if you could cap your contribution at 25 to 30 million, so you didn't spend as a council... And you could
this is the community that said this.
And you could build new, that would be a good deal, right? And it was then that Momentum stepped forward and said, well, look, we think we can take a leadership position on this, and if you can commit to that 25 million, so saving the ratepayer monies already, we'll find the other money to build a new theatre and work through a process.
That's interesting because there seems to be, maybe it's a vocal minority, but there's some people that are just so anti this regional theatre. They're just like, no, upgrade that Founders.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if people just didn't even know about the public feedback in regards to the Founders Theatre.
Oh, yeah. I think you'd always...
there's always people that are against anything.
Well, yeah, but I think equally you'll find that if they said we're going to do Founders, you'll have people who would say, well, that's crazy, why aren't you building new?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be opposing views.
Right,
I think what we've got to do is sit down with those people with opposing views and understand what it is that they're opposing. So a lot of people talk to me about, I don't like, or they might say, I don't like the new theatre because there's not enough parking. And I say, well, where was the parking at Founders? I was on the side streets. Well, okay, how far did you walk? About 300 to 400 metres. Well, isn't that the same for Founders? Isn't it the same for the new theatre?
Yeah.
We've got drop-off zones, we've got that. And they go, okay. No, I hadn't thought of it like that. But the traffic's going to be terrible. You should provide parking underneath. Well, do you really want 300 cars coming out onto Victoria Street after a performance? Oh, no, that would be bad. Right?
Yeah.
And how do you, when you go to the Sydney Opera House or when you've been to a theatre in London or even Auckland,
you're not parking on the street where the theatre or whatever the attraction is.
Right.
Yeah.
So often people's, and we saw this in mining too, right? People's opposition to a project is normally around one or two specific issues, not the entirety of the project. And when you put the entirety of the project in front of them and you talk about the benefits and parking and traffic is an issue. We accept that it's an issue, but it's an issue that we believe can be mitigated given the timing and how we can operate that.
Well, isn't
People
like
get it, right?
the Union Square development that's happening, whenever that is?
Yep.
I think they're going to build a 4-story car park or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that mitigates that issue.
Yeah, there's plans there, and we know there's as many car parks within that, and absolutely. So people say, well, hang on, I'm infirmed, or I'm a little bit elderly, or I have trouble walking 300 to 400 meters. Cool. Okay. Well, how can we help you get to the theatre and be accessible? Can we provide a drop-off space for you? Is there other ways we can get you to the theatre? I mean, it's really interesting to me that when the cricket's held at Seddon Park, one day there were 30,000 people.
Well, even with the Sevens.
The Sevens.
Yeah.
The only car park at the rugby is at the school, and yet and it's the same distance to walk, right?
And yet people don't complain about that.
No.
Yeah,
but
it's
again,
interesting.
But I think it's less about pointing out it's more about working with the individuals to find solutions to their
But that's
issues, right?
extremely difficult, right? You can't go to every single individual and sit down with them and be like, hey, have you thought about this or this?
No, look, and where people make Facebook posts and go for it, that's fine.
Yeah. But do you get frustrated though? Like if you see a post on Facebook and they're posting about the regional theatre and they're posting something and you're like,
oh yes, I mean people.
Because I read it sometimes and I'm not even involved with it and I get annoyed.
Oh look, yeah, you do, but there is many people who've reached out and asked. We've presented to heaps of groups and people have asked those questions in those groups. And the thing is that people who post on Facebook aren't going to reach out and seek they've got an opinion. That's what it is, right? Yeah. The great thing about opinions, you don't have to take them. But
that's right.
But if you can sit down with people, and again, we don't have to agree. But what most people that we have presented to, who still may not like it, they will accept. Generally, reasonable people will go, I accept there's more benefits than negatives, right? There's more benefits to the CBD transformation, the opportunity to open up the city to the river, the integration of multicultural design with Tainui and Thorpe, the opportunity to really transform the CBD, to have a higher standard of theatre than we've got at Founders, better seats, better acoustics, better sightlines, bigger staging, all of those good things are a benefit. So people go, well, there's more benefits than negatives, but I think this negative is still
it might be because they have an emotional attachment to
absolutely, and some people do. Right? Like absolutely, it's the other. The classical there at the moment is the Rhododendron Lawn at the Hamilton Gardens. I mean, that's kicked off, right?
Yeah.
And yet everyone's and again they've got one perspective, and it's like, well, if you look at all of the considerations in the plan.
I don't think a lot of people have even looked at the plan because I've got into arguments on Facebook over this.
Yeah. Well,
and then I look back on it and I'm like, why did I even do that?
Yeah. Well, there's one thing in an argument on Facebook. It's like,
so what's happening with the theatre? Like, how far along is it?
So cool. So what we can tell you is of recent times. So in July, we had this year we've secured another $4 million out from the lottery's grants, which gets our confirmed funding up to $54 million, and we've applied to the Provincial Growth Fund for $15 million, which is a $12 million grant and a $3 million loan. And in July, we got conditional approval from the Provincial Growth Fund that we had met all of the conditions, or had met, all of the application requirements to now have a negotiation. So that's a really long process. I wrote this application this time last year. So
why? So why does it take so long?
Well, it's oversubscribed for one. Yeah, it's a big beast. There's a lot of applications.
Do you have to reach out to them every month and chase them up? And
I'm sure they're sick of me, right? So, but that's the gig. So in July we got that letter, and we'd been working with the officials up until that time. It had then gone to an independent expert panel who'd come back with some questions and we'd answer those. So it's an ongoing, it's an iterative process, right? You keep providing more information and clarity as you go.
Yeah.
So in July we got the letter that said you got conditional approval. Now we're starting negotiating on the conditions for that. So that's what we've been doing up till now.
Okay. And then what's the process after that? Then it just starts being built, or is there another process? We've been informed that we've met the conditions of negotiation, and they'll come back to us
with what their decision is in the next few weeks.
So when are you hoping that this will start being built?
Yeah, so let's say we get the money from the provincial growth. Let's just, given we've gone all this way, we're pretty confident we're going to get there. We're just waiting on formal notification.
Yeah.
So let's play that game and assume we've got it. That will take us to 66 million of the 74 that we need.
Okay.
Right? So that means we're 8 million short.
Could you start building it though before you get the rest of the money?
We've always said we'd like to be within 5 million of the target before we start building, because we know as Momentum we can carry that risk, and we also know we've got some applications with the Regional Cultural and Heritage Fund and some other funds that are lined up for next year, which we'll go through that process to fill that 5 million, right? So we know we can take that risk, and it's pretty low risk. But we would like to be within 5 million. At the moment, within 8 million. If we can ensure that within 5 million, we'd say go.
Yeah.
Now we're in resource consent hearings coming up next week.
Okay.
So if we assume, and that's taken a long time to get to that point, because that's pretty complex site and pretty complex building, as you can imagine, with an international standard theatre.
Yeah.
We've met with a whole lot of submitters, both positive and negative. We've met with all those. There's only 28 submissions, which is pretty good, and they're about half and half opposed, half supportive. We've done iwi consultation. We've done all that work, which has been a long process. So assuming we get resource consent as we expect late November, early December, and assuming there's no appeals to that, assuming we get the PGF and we can be within 5 million of that, we should be able to hit the ground and start construction maybe February of next year.
And that'll take, what, 2 years, a year?
Yeah, it's 18 months build time and then a couple of months for getting your systems and training your staff and those things. So looking like an April 2022 opening at this stage.
That's quite a while away.
It is. It's a long process. I mean, when you think about it, Founders was closed in 2016. We didn't really put our hand up until probably, I think it was July of 2016, and then we didn't get the go ahead until later that year, and then we finally kicked into it. And I think we appointed someone in 2017, so we're now 2 years into a design. We had to go through a process of appointing a consulting design team. We had to find the right site. We had to find the funds. So
were you hands-on with the actual design of the theatre, or was that more the council, or was it like an effort between the...
So Momentum established a governance panel of experts to appoint Charcoal Blue. So Charcoal Blue we went out to tender, and Charcoal Blue are a lead theatre design company out of London and Melbourne.
Yeah.
So they've worked with the New Zealand Royal Ballet and the Hamilton Operatic and all the user groups, the New Zealand Symphony and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Both local and international. They said for us to come in at the standard we need needs to be this big with this sort of acoustic standard and this sort of sight lines and these sorts of seats and blah blah blah. The group came back and said, okay, well, how do we now build something that we think we can afford to meet all of those requirements? And Charcoal Blue did all that design work. And initially they came back with a concept plan that was hundreds of millions. We're like, no, can't do that. Yeah. Can't afford it. That's crazy.
So then you go back and you tell them what to take out? And
yeah, well, how can you still meet that? Can you meet those standards with something less grand? Can you do something? And it's a process of working that through. And so what we believe at 74 million that we have now is an international standard theatre of 1,300 seats, which will meet all the requirements of all the user groups in terms of space and acoustics and all those things.
And a hotel on top of it.
Yeah, well, the hotels, and that's been run by a private group. So no public money goes to the hotel. The hotel's in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the hotel is run by the land that was then, when we identified the site, it was put up by the Plor family who have donated the site to the theatre. They have to retain the historic hotel, and they're doing their own private development. But by doing it in conjunction, that's what's made it viable, because otherwise the theatre would have to carry all the costs of resource consenting and all the design work on its own. But by doing it together, you can share those costs. And that's what makes it viable. That's the sort of thing that councils can do that through CCOs and establish different mechanisms to drive that. So Hamilton used to have a thing called Hamilton Properties Limited that used to work on behalf of council doing commercial property developments.
They don't do that anymore?
Don't do that anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Why not?
Under Judy Hardacre, they were trying to bring it back to do exactly that. And then under Mayor King, they decided they didn't want to do that as a council.
Did they say why?
I think there is a fundamental belief in this current council that commercial deals should stand alone on their own commercial, and they shouldn't have any public support, any public ratepayer support. And whether that's right, wrong, or otherwise is for the politicians to make. But that's been the overriding theory under Mayor King and his council, and it's not right or wrong. It's just a view.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you couldn't reenact that.
Oh, okay. So would it be? So it wouldn't be too difficult to reenact that?
No, it wouldn't.
It probably depends on who's
depends on who's the mayor and on what they want to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think personally, I think it's something we should be doing because
that's why you should run for mayor.
No. So personally, I think it's a good thing simply because the beauty of Hamilton Properties is that it can do developments at a higher risk level and at a reduced return. So it was criticised because it didn't make the returns that commercial provide. So what I'm saying there is Hamilton Properties are set up, and the intent is to do a commercial development, but it might, for example, it would develop the BNZ building and it developed the hotel with Tenure, right?
Yep.
But the idea wasn't for us to make a commercial return, or Hamilton Properties wasn't there to make a huge commercial return for the city. It was to initiate the need for a hotel and a new business centre on the river. And we were prepared, or Hamilton Properties was prepared to take a lesser return, even though it made pretty good returns, than it would be for a developer to do it on their own.
No.
A developer won't take that risk on their own. So by accepting a lower return and acting as a financier, those sorts of things, the real outcome you're after is initiating that transformation in the city or providing that opportunity.
Well, because I think the CBD has a lot of potential.
Yeah, your map's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I really agree with the last two councils' view of facing the river, right? I mean, you go to Gothenburg, you see Victoria on the river, how good that's been, and the opportunity to do that is
well, even like Brisbane and Melbourne.
Yeah.
You look how they use their rivers, so...
Look, East Perth was the same, right? Yeah. When I moved to Perth, East Perth used to be the warehouse capital, and now it's this massive, well, not massive, it's just a really cool designed townhouse settlement on the banks of the river with little cafes and the river pathway, and we've got all that. We've got the river pathways. It's all there. It's all there. Just everything turns away. Yeah. So there's different ways to nail this, and again, all of these ideas. Talk about people complaining. They'll have critics. People will criticise that concept. They'll think that there's no role in local government to support commercial activity. So these are values-based decisions that people have, and that's okay. As long as in your decision you're transparent about why you're doing it, and what the outcomes you're seeking, and how you drive it forward. And
so that's what you can do, right? How do you get the word out about Momentum Waikato and everything that we've just talked about?
I mean, we've done a massive social media push in the last couple of years.
I only found out about you guys because of what happened with the Waikato Regional Theatre.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's been a great thing for people to identify Momentum Waikato.
Yeah.
It hasn't necessarily been a great thing to people understand that the theatre is just a project.
Yeah.
And then all this other stuff we do is actually the work. So, the grant of the endowment fund and the granting and working with social enterprise and building endowment funds with people and trying to shape a better Waikato for everyone. Our vision is a better Waikato for everyone forever. That's our core business. But simply because of the networks we have and the skills we have and the people we've got on board and our ability to operate independently of councils and access other funds and do it, even though it's 2 years and we're only just getting to the point where we can say push the button, it's ready to go. We don't think councils would have got there any faster, right?
Yeah. So are there any other projects you have in the works that... can you talk about it?
I mean, we've identified this opportunity to work with a group that's looking at transformation of farming practices up the upper Waipa. So,
yeah.
so over a 3-year period, taking from intensive dairy to organic dairy, which has a significant impact on the water quality of the upper Waipa in terms of reduction of sediment, nitrogen, phosphates, and E. coli. Because you can, and what we're looking at there is how do you ride. While you're going to organic, you've got to de-herd, you reduce your size of your herds. How do you keep the cash flow of the business going while you do that? So that's a sort of a real change philosophy in farming practices up there. And we need to do that with we need to buy about 10 farms over time to do it. But the payback is way better water quality. But it's also a higher milk. Once you get through the 3-year period, you start getting a higher milk return for organic milk on the international market.
Oh, wow.
So, that's a cultural change. And I think all of our sectors are going through a reset. Every business opportunity in New Zealand is having to go through a reset. And I think we've really pushed in the last 2 decades a volume-based approach, right? More milk, more cows, more tourists, more.
Yeah.
When in fact, you go back to my earliest comment about the opportunity in New Zealand as regional New Zealand. If we took a value-based approach, so organic milks, and I know in New Zealand we go, organics and bloody greenies, and look, I was a bit the same, but actually the market in Europe for organic products, look at Manuka honey.
Yeah.
Right? Here's the funny. When I was living in Jakarta, at my supermarket, all of the New Zealand honey products were locked away in a cabinet, and you literally had to go and get a key, and someone would come. It's like getting bluff oysters out of the in Hamilton.
Is that because what? People would steal them?
Yeah, because it was so expensive and so valued and so sought after.
Wow.
Kiwi fruit were like $4 a kiwi fruit, right? But anything New Zealand has got that reputation of having a high value quality.
Well, yeah.
We just don't get it here because we're not exposed
born
to
with it.
Yeah.
Well,
right?
you only know what you know. So I wasn't until I went to, I think when I went to India and I tried the milk there, it just doesn't taste as good.
The butter's orange in America.
Yeah. Mm. So you go to different places and you can taste, you definitely tell the taste difference with the quality of our food here.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
But you just don't. It's not something that really computes with the average Joe or the average Kiwi.
And it's like, one of the great things about New Zealand was that you used to go on wilderness treks and you'd be on your own. Yeah. Now you go and do the Tongariro crossing and you're in a line.
People.
Right? Yeah. So that's a volume-based approach. How many more people can we get on that track? How many more? And look, years ago I did Parks and Recreation Management, which is probably ironic that I ended up in mining. Out of Lincoln. And I remember back then they were talking about the use versus abuse matrix, which is basically saying in tourism, if you have too many people, you then start to abusing the very thing people are coming to see.
That's right.
Right? And then you've got to put in more tracks, and then you've got to put in more maintenance and your operating costs. So how do you get value out of things? And and again, in New Zealand, because we live it and we kind of wake up with it, and it's like, But when you've been overseas and you see, people just want to come and there's a business in Taihape. So my wife's her iwi's she's from Taihape, Mokai Pātea. There's a business in Taihape that charges people a premium to just come and stay on the farm for a week, and all they do is they've built a pretty flash. Sleep out barn thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But apart from that, all they do is they feed out hay to cows. They go into the milking shed and they milk cows and actually get to touch a cow and put a set of cups on a cow. They get to feed out on the back of a truck. Yeah, ride on the back of a ute. They get to touch a sheep. They get to shear a sheep. They get to see a sheep being cut up, and just the stuff that you and I take for granted as Kiwis. And I think even actually, there's a whole lot of Kiwis in New Zealand now who have never seen and done that.
No, well, they've probably grown up in urban environments.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but people pay a premium for that, right? They can walk through green grass, and they can walk down to a river, and they can swim in a river, and they're going, and they're paying. That's in Taihape. That happens right now, and there are people who there are small businesses doing really good things and making great money, bringing international people and taking them for walks through the Coromandel. Paying a premium to be at one with nature and to be to actually walk onto a marae and to be welcomed on, things that are authentic to New Zealand. And the most authentic part of New Zealand is regional New Zealand. It's Te Awamutu and it's Te Kuiti and it's Taumaranui and Taihape.
Well, because I lived in Auckland, like I grew up there, and I think since I've moved out, I've actually visited more places within New Zealand since leaving Auckland.
Yeah, it's great, right?
Yeah,
it's a cool place. New Zealand's fantastic.
Yeah, I think people don't realise that Auckland is very different from, say, the rest of New Zealand. It's just its own thing. I think that's probably why there's the whole Auckland versus New Zealand debate sometimes. But
it's like Waikato. Waikato is one of the most authentic places you can get to.
Yeah,
because from here you can.
Oh, there's so many great places in close proximity.
That's
it's
right.
Great.
So that whole authentic. So this whole value proposition. What is authentic? Because people realise that they live in cities around the world and they're seeking for something that is different than getting on the train and all those things. And New Zealand offers that. But if all we're going to do is have more cows and more cars and more trucks, we're not making the most. Now we've got to go through some transition.
We're going to lose some of that.
Yeah, and we've got to go through a reset, and it's going to be tough, and we're going to have to do some hard decisions about that. And I'm not one to knock farming or the heritage aspects of where our communities come from. I think Mahatma Gandhi talked about this, about you can't, people who just didn't know, you can't blame them for things that they did that they weren't aware of. Environmental impact being one of those. The farming practices of New Zealand were what they were because they were the best at the time. Yeah, the impact of that's only been known in recent years, so therefore we have to change. But we shouldn't be bashing them over the head with that. We need to bring, it's not an urbanites versus farming community thing. It's actually a New Zealand thing. Yeah. It's actually, how do we reset New Zealand? Because we're still going to be the best place in the world to grow milk, grow cows, do it cheaply, right? So issues around methane and nitrogen, well, let's find solutions to those things, but still not lose that opportunity. And yes, there's a movement away to, away from meat and those products, and that'll happen over time. But it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because actually that Kiwi number 8 wire attitude and being pretty irreverent to, that's what makes us Kiwis. That's actually pretty cool. Our connection with Māori and the treaty and how we do that. I talk about this all the time. I identify being through New Zealand by saying kia ora to people and giving the old eye lift, chin lift when I'm overseas to people. I mean, funny story. So my wife and I, we were in Dublin. We were on top of the Guinness factory. You've done it? Great tour.
Yep.
So you get to the top of the factory, right, and it's that big glass dome, and there's a bar at the top of the factory. And we were across the side of the bar, and we look over, and there's a guy wearing a greenstone, and he's got a tāmoko on his arm, and he looks over and just gives us the old head nod and the eye lift. Oh, yeah. And we did the same. Yeah. And we just knew we were from New Zealand. And I think that, and as I said, that authentic, we can't lose that. Movement, but how do we leverage that to be something that's really authentic? Because I like nothing better than going to Taihape and sitting in the pub with the locals and having a beer. But I'm equally as happy as talking to the Prime Minister about the Provincial Growth Fund, and that's what Kiwis are. We're adaptable. We can't just become.
We're like a village in some senses. Yeah, the total population.
So let's not lose that, eh? Let's grasp hold of it.
Cool. Well, hey, I know you got to get going, but this has been great. I wish I could talk to you for longer, actually. It's been awesome.
No, so it's a pretty hard case. It's really good.
Yeah. Well, please come on again at some point. I'm sure we can. There's heaps of different stuff we could talk about.
Yeah, well, look, when the theatre gets up, we're pretty confident we'll get there. We'll have to come back and talk more about that.
Yeah, definitely.
And,
Cool. So if anyone wants to check out Momentum Waikato and what they do, there's a website?
Absolutely. momentumwaikato.org.nz, or if you just Google it, it'll pop up. Yep. And we're on Facebook and on Instagram and all those good things. But, one of our overriding ethos is that we're in the people game, right? Yeah, everything Momentum is about people. So, if people want us to present to them, come and talk to them, meet with me individually, meet with one of the team. We've got a small team. There's 3.6 of us, FTEs. So 4 of us in the office, but part-time, 2 of them are part-timers. So we're a pretty small team, but we get a lot done through our networks and our governance groups and our other people. And, happy to talk.
Great.
Awesome, man. Thanks for the time.
No worries. All right, that's the show, guys. Until next time, stay safe. See ya.